51-year-old author Helen Bailey appeared to be thriving. Eagerly planning her wedding, she shared her life with her cherished dog, Boris. Yet beneath this facade of happiness lay a sinister truth. Just as Helen began to embrace a new chapter filled with love, betrayal would ensnare her. What seemed like a promising future was destined to unravel into a tragic tale of greed and murder. On April 11, 2016, in the quiet town of Royston, Hertfordshire, a chilling mystery began to unfold, forever changing the lives of those who loved her. Helen Bailey, a 51-year-old successful author known for her Electra Brown series, seemed to have vanished without a trace. Her fiancé, Stewart, a 55-year-old widower with whom she shared a home, reported her missing 4 days later. Helen's beloved Dachshund, Boris, had also disappeared, raising alarms. Ian claimed he had found a note from Helen stating she needed some time alone and had gone to their holiday home in Broadstairs. This explanation initially seemed plausible given Helen's history of coping with grief through writing and reflection. However, as days turned into weeks with no sign of Helen or Boris, those who knew her best began to suspect that something far more sinister was at play. Little did they know this disappearance would unravel into a tale of betrayal, greed, and cold-blooded murder. Helen Bailey was born on August 22 and 1964 in Northumberland, England. Growing up in a supportive family environment, she developed an early interest in writing. Initially aspiring to become a forensic scientist, she pursued a degree in psychology at Thames Polytechnic. However, she transitioned into a career in media and marketing, working on projects for popular children's characters such as Rugrats and Garfield. In 1996, Helen married John Seinfeld, the head of a licensing rights company. The couple enjoyed a successful life together until tragedy struck on February 2, 2011, when John drowned while swimming during their holiday in Barbados. Following his death, Helen began to process her grief through writing. She started the blog Planet Grief, which resonated with many experiencing loss. This blog served as an outlet for her emotions, but it also helped her connect with others facing similar challenges. It was through this platform that she eventually met Ian Stewart, leading to a new chapter in her life. Helen was financially secure, with assets exceeding £3 million and a life insurance policy valued at £1.8 million. This financial stability would later play a significant role in the investigation into her disappearance and subsequent murder. Helen's estate included substantial properties in Royston and Broadstairs, which she intended for Ian to inherit, reflecting her trust in him. Helen Bailey met Ian Stewart in October 2011 through her blog Planet Grief, where both shared their experiences of loss after the deaths of their respective spouses. Their connection grew. As grief intertwined their lives, Helen Bailey and Ian Stewart found solace in each other, igniting a romantic connection. Their relationship deepened, culminating in a decision to move in together, merging their families into a new household. Ian, a man with 2 adult sons from his previous marriage, welcomed Helen and her cherished dog Boris into their shared life. Together, they seemed to be crafting a future filled with promise, even making plans for marriage. While they projected a united front to the outside world, the dynamics of their relationship were complex and fraught with tension. Beneath the surface, an intricate web of emotions and motivations swirled, hinting at the darker truths lurking in the background. Yet, as the investigation into Helen's disappearance unfolded, financial motives began to surface, revealing themselves as pivotal elements. Helen's trust in Ian was palpable. She had made him a beneficiary in her will, a decision that would cast a shadow over their relationship. Helen had also granted Ian power of attorney over her financial affairs, a move that would prove significant in the tragic events that were to follow. These elements began to weave a narrative of manipulation and control that would soon be laid bare. On April 15, 2016, Helen Bailey vanished from Royston, Hertfordshire, her last known sighting cloaked in mystery. Just prior to her disappearance, Helen was enthusiastic about planning her upcoming wedding, a stark contrast to the silence that would soon envelop her life. On the day she disappeared, Helen had been visiting wedding venues, brimming with excitement about her future with Ian Stewart. Later that afternoon, she penned a note for Ian, indicating she needed some time alone. This note hinted that she planned to retreat to their holiday home in Broadstairs. However, it would soon be established that she never made that journey, deepening the enigma of her disappearance. The sudden void left by her absence raised immediate alarms. Helen's behavior was uncharacteristic for someone eagerly anticipating a new chapter. A note she left behind, alongside her activities on the day she vanished, would become critical pieces of evidence in the ensuing investigation. Witnesses later confirmed spotting Helen walking Boris between 3:40 p.m. and 3:50 p.m. on April 11th, further illuminating her last known movements. With this information, authorities turned their scrutiny toward Ian Stewart, marking him as a person of interest. Discrepancies began to surface in Ian's account of events, amplifying suspicions. His assertion that Helen had left of her own accord was met with skepticism from family and friends, who portrayed her as a devoted writer and dog owner. The investigation would soon peel back layers, revealing a far darker reality behind Ian's actions and intentions. In the immediate aftermath of Helen Bailey's disappearance, the police response was alarmingly tepid. Classified as low priority due to Helen being an adult who left a note indicating she needed time alone, authorities initially believed she might return. However, as days slipped by without any word from Helen, anxiety mounted among her loved ones. They described her absence as profoundly out of character, compelling police to intensify their investigation. On April 15, Ian Stewart reported Helen missing, a move that ignited a more comprehensive inquiry. Search efforts began in earnest, mobilizing both police forces and dedicated volunteers, all desperate to uncover the truth. In a desperate pursuit of answers, officers embarked on house-to-house inquiries throughout the neighborhood. They sought information from neighbors, anyone who might have seen Helen Bailey or her beloved dog, Boris. Search teams also combed through local parks, retracing the paths where Helen was known to walk. Witness accounts later confirmed that Helen had been seen walking Boris between 3:40 p.m. and 3:50 p.m. on April 11th. This crucial timeline established her last known movements, a flicker of hope in the growing darkness of uncertainty. However, despite these efforts, the investigation yielded no immediate leads. The chilling silence surrounding Helen's sudden disappearance led investigators to contemplate a more sinister scenario. The absence of any evidence heightened the urgency of the case, prompting a meticulous examination of Ian Stewart's actions and statements regarding her vanishing. As the investigation into Helen Bailey's disappearance unfolded, inconsistencies in Ian's accounts began to emerge, casting a shadow of suspicion over him. With each revelation, the narrative surrounding Helen's fate deepened, and significant technological leads came to light that would prove pivotal. On April 16, 2016, investigators uncovered that Helen's mobile phone had connected to the Wi-Fi network at the couple's holiday cottage in Kent. This connection occurred merely days after she was reported missing, raising alarming questions about her voluntary absence. The implications of this discovery were profound. It suggested that Helen may not have gone to the cottage of her own accord, as Ian Stewart had initially claimed, and it cast a dark cloud over his whereabouts during that critical period. The prosecution would later assert that this connection was a key piece of evidence. It painted a picture of Ian possibly visiting the cottage after reporting Helen missing, potentially to orchestrate a cover-up. Further investigation into financial records revealed even more troubling activity, intensifying the scrutiny of Ian's actions. On the very day Helen disappeared, Ian Stewart had alarmingly increased a standing order from Helen's personal bank account to their joint account, escalating it from £400 to £4,000 per month. This sudden financial maneuver raised immediate red flags for investigators. This behavior hinted at a premeditated scheme to access Helen's funds without her consent, suggesting financial motives lurking beneath the surface of her disappearance. Furthermore, contrary to Ian Stewart's initial claims, it became evident that Helen may not have gone to the cottage willingly. This contradiction raised significant questions about his whereabouts during that critical time, leading the prosecution to argue that this was a pivotal piece of evidence. The prosecution alleged that Ian had visited the cottage after reporting Helen missing, potentially to stage a cover-up. A thorough examination of his financial records revealed suspicious bank activity that further implicated him. On the very day Helen disappeared, Ian Stewart made a startling move. He increased a standing order from Helen's personal bank account to their joint account from £400 to £4,000 per month. This abrupt change sent immediate alarm bells ringing for investigators. It strongly suggested a premeditated plan to access Helen's funds without her consent, further indicating potential financial motives behind her disappearance. Additionally, investigators uncovered that Ian Stewart had attempted to exert power of attorney over Helen Bailey's financial affairs shortly after she went missing, implying a troubling intent to control her assets. While Helen remained classified as a missing person, investigators discovered Ian's alarming online searches, He had looked up methods for disposing of a body and life insurance policies, raising profound concerns about his intentions. These troubling searches added yet another layer of suspicion regarding Ian's actions following Helen's disappearance. Technological traces not only provided critical evidence, but also fueled the fire of doubt surrounding his claims. Investigators meticulously linked Ian Stewart to the mysterious disappearance of Helen Bailey. They uncovered a web of motives and suspicious actions that unfolded after her vanishing. Phone records and questionable financial transactions painted a troubling picture, one that would shape the case against him as the investigation deepened. These findings not only influenced the trajectory of the investigation, but also solidified the mounting evidence against Ian Stewart as authorities delved into Helen Bailey's disappearance. Ian Stewart's actions quickly raised eyebrows among investigators after he reported Helen missing. His decision to take a holiday in Mallorca was particularly alarming, seen as an unusually detached response to such a personal tragedy. Ian's absence from search efforts, coupled with his lack of engagement in the investigation, compelled law enforcement to scrutinize him closely upon his return from Spain. In a tense series of police interviews, Ian was questioned about his movements and the inconsistencies in his account of events. Investigators noted several discrepancies in his statements regarding Helen's disappearance, raising further suspicions. He struggled to recall even basic details about Helen, such as the color of her eyes and the address of their holiday home. These lapses in memory heightened suspicions, leading authorities to classify him as a person of interest. On July 11, 2016, the investigation took a decisive turn when police arrested Ian Stewart on suspicion of murder. This arrest came after a trove of evidence had been meticulously gathered. The culmination of Ian's suspicious behavior, the timing of his holiday, and the inconsistencies in his narrative led to a significant breakthrough in the case, casting further doubt on his involvement in Helen's disappearance. Importantly, investigators discovered evidence suggesting Ian's attempts to use power of attorney over Helen Bailey's financial affairs shortly after her disappearance, exposing potential motives tied to her wealth. The arrest marked a pivotal moment in the investigation, redirecting the focus toward Ian Stewart and laying the groundwork for the legal battles that were to follow as authorities delved deeper into his actions. As the investigation unfolded, it became increasingly clear that Ian Stewart was not simply a grieving partner. He was a prime suspect in a chilling crime. On July 15, 2016, a significant breakthrough emerged. Acting on intelligence and growing suspicions about Ian Stewart, police conducted a thorough search of their home, seeking answers in the shadows of a perplexing mystery. The search at Hartwell Lodge in Royston took a harrowing turn when officers unearthed human remains concealed within a cesspit beneath the garage. Among the remains was Helen's body, alongside her beloved dachshund, Boris. This grim discovery came after investigators had been tipped off about the potential concealment of Helen's body on the property. The cesspit lay hidden beneath a concrete slab, making it inaccessible without extensive excavation. Previously, the police had noted troubling inconsistencies in Ian's statements and his peculiar behavior following Helen's disappearance. This prompted them to intensify their search efforts at the home. It was there that the bodies were uncovered. Forensic teams sprang into action, conducting an autopsy to ascertain the cause of death. Their findings revealed a chilling truth. Helen had been drugged with zopiclone, a sedative commonly used to treat insomnia. Traces of this medication were found in her system, indicating that she had been incapacitated before her untimely death. The condition of her remains unequivocally suggested foul play, each detail painting a darker picture of her final moments. The evidence gathered was consistent with suffocation, a crucial detail that helped establish both the timeline and method of murder. This damning proof directly implicated Ian Stewart in Helen Bailey's tragic death. The discovery shattered the hopes of those searching for Helen, yet it also equipped law enforcement with the necessary grounds to charge Ian Stewart with her murder shortly thereafter. This pivotal moment shifted the investigation from a missing person case to one of homicide, with Ian Stewart emerging as the primary suspect. Just days earlier, on July 16, 2016, Ian Stewart had been formally charged with multiple offenses, including murder, preventing the course of justice, and preventing a lawful burial. These charges stemmed directly from the investigation into Helen Bailey's disappearance, whose remains had been discovered only a day prior. Following the charges, Stewart was remanded in custody, a reflection of the grave nature of the allegations against him. On July 19, 2016, he made his first court appearance at St. Albans Crown Court, where formal charges were presented. The prosecution laid out the evidence gathered thus far, which included crucial findings from forensic investigations and compelling witness testimonies. These revelations suggested a deeply troubling narrative regarding Stewart's involvement in Helen's disappearance and subsequent death. The court proceedings marked the start of an intricate legal process that would unfold over the months to come. The prosecution underscored the gravity of the situation, indicating their intent to seek a conviction based on substantial evidence linking Ian Stewart to the murder of Helen Bailey. As the layers of this complex case began to unfurl, the chilling details of Helen's fate cast a long shadow over the proceedings, leaving a community grappling with the loss of a beloved figure. In August 2016, the investigation into Ian Stewart's role in Helen Bailey's murder escalated, with authorities laser-focused on gathering critical evidence. Investigators honed in on Ian's financial activities, which were pivotal in establishing a potential motive for the crime. They meticulously analyzed communications between Ian and various financial institutions, seeking to uncover the depths of his knowledge regarding Helen's financial affairs, particularly her considerable assets, which exceeded £3 million. Among these assets was a life insurance policy valued at £1.28 million. The findings painted a troubling picture. Ian was not only aware of Helen's wealth, but may have harbored financial motives tied to her death. On October 12, 2016, Ian Stewart faced the court for a plea hearing at St. Albans Crown Court. There, he formally pleaded not guilty to all charges, which included murder, preventing the course of justice, and preventing lawful burial. This plea marked a critical turning point, setting the stage for the impending trial, with proceedings scheduled to commence in January 2017. The charges against Ian included preventing the course of justice and preventing lawful burial. This plea set the stage for the impending trial, with the court scheduling proceedings to commence in January 2017. Ian Stewart entered his not guilty plea, signaling his intention to contest the serious allegations made against him. As the case progressed, his defense team began meticulously preparing their strategy. The trial of Ian Stewart officially commenced on January 9, 2017, at St. Albans Crown Court. This marked a pivotal moment in the legal battle surrounding the murder of Helen Bailey. On the opening day of the trial, both the prosecution and defense laid out their initial statements. They outlined the key arguments that would shape the case, with the prosecution detailing the serious allegations against Ian Stewart. The prosecution argued that Ian Stewart had drugged Helen Bailey with Zopiclone for several months leading up to her murder. They contended that this was part of a calculated plan to incapacitate her, ultimately culminating in her suffocation. Following her tragic death, the prosecution claimed that Stewart callously disposed of her body in a cesspit located beneath their home. They introduced critical evidence to support these shocking claims. Among this evidence was the revelation that Helen's mobile phone had connected to the Wi-Fi network at the couple's holiday cottage in Kent shortly after her disappearance. This connection raised suspicions regarding Ian Stewart's involvement. Further complicating matters, evidence showed that on the day Helen vanished, Ian Stewart had dramatically increased a standing order from Helen's personal bank account to their joint account, raising it from £400 to £4,000 per month. This financial maneuver suggested potential motives behind his actions. The prosecution also highlighted Ian Stewart's attempts to exert power of attorney over Helen's financial affairs shortly after she went missing, raising serious questions about his intentions. Evidence suggested that Ian Stewart had indeed visited the cottage after Helen's disappearance, amplifying suspicions regarding his involvement. On the fateful day Helen went missing, key evidence emerged. Ian Stewart had dramatically raised the standing order from Helen's personal bank account to their joint account, increasing it from £400 to £4,000 per month. This financial shift indicated possible motives lurking beneath the surface. The prosecution further highlighted Ian Stewart's attempts to gain power of attorney over Helen's financial affairs shortly after she vanished, raising additional questions about his intentions regarding her assets. Helen's brother provided poignant testimony, recalling a previous conversation in which Helen had jokingly remarked that the cesspit in their garage would be a great place to hide a body. This seemingly innocuous statement took on a chilling significance given the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. In a chilling twist of fate, Helen Bailey had once jokingly remarked that the cesspit in their garage would be a great place to hide a body. This seemingly innocuous comment took on a haunting significance, especially considering the grim events that would later unfold in that very location. In addition to the evidence, the prosecution presented a range of witnesses, including family and friends, as well as forensic experts, all corroborating claims regarding Helen's incapacitation prior to her death. Family and friends shared their grave concerns for Helen's state of mind leading up to her mysterious disappearance. Their observations about her relationship with Ian Stewart suggested that it may not have been as stable as he had portrayed. Forensic experts took the stand, testifying about the harrowing autopsy findings that confirmed drugging as the cause of death. They revealed that traces of zopiclone were discovered in Helen's system, deepening the mystery surrounding her demise. In stark contrast to the prosecution's assertions, Ian Stewart's defense claimed that Helen had been kidnapped by two men on the day she disappeared. He alleged that he had refrained from reporting this to the police in a misguided effort to protect her. Stewart further claimed that these kidnappers had demanded a ransom of £500,000. The defense sought to paint Ian Stewart as a caring partner, deeply affected by Helen's sudden disappearance. They called character witnesses to challenge the prosecution's evidence, labeling it as circumstantial and asserting that there was no direct proof linking him to the crime. As the trial unfolded, critical cross-examinations ensued. The defense mounted a vigorous challenge against the prosecution's claims, branding the evidence as merely circumstantial. They argued vehemently that no direct proof could link Ian Stewart to the heinous crime. The trial unfolded with critical cross-examinations that kept the courtroom on edge. The courtroom was tense as the prosecution unveiled a series of significant inconsistencies in Ian Stewart's statements concerning Helen Bailey and the nature of their relationship. Each line of questioning unearthed discrepancies that painted a troubling picture. During police interviews, Ian Stewart struggled to recall even the most basic details about Helen, such as the color of her eyes. This inability to remember raised serious doubts about his credibility and suggested an unsettling lack of genuine concern for her well-being. In stark contrast, the defense sought to discredit the witness testimonies presented by the prosecution. They challenged the reliability of the evidence against Stewart, arguing that the testimonies were rooted in speculation rather than concrete proof. The defense attempted to weave an alternative narrative, suggesting various scenarios that could explain Helen's disappearance without implicating Ian Stewart. They emphasized a possible kidnapping, diverting attention away from their client. A pivotal moment arose during the trial when the jury visited Hartwell Lodge, the very site where Helen's body, along with her beloved dog, Boris, had been discovered. This visit allowed jurors to gain first-hand insight into the physical context of the crime. Observing the location provided jurors with a tangible understanding of the evidence presented during the trial, including the cesspit that held the grim secrets of Helen's tragic fate. As the trial drew to a close, the prosecution delivered a compelling summary of their case against Ian Stewart. They highlighted the financial motivations and premeditated actions that culminated in Helen Bailey's murder. The prosecution asserted that Ian Stewart had a clear financial incentive to kill Helen, as he stood to gain significantly from her untimely death through her life insurance policy and substantial assets. They painted a chilling portrait of a man who meticulously planned the murder, drugging Helen with zopiclone to incapacitate her before suffocating her. Stewart's actions revealed a facade of concern that concealed his true intentions. In response, the defense reiterated their alternative theory regarding Helen's disappearance, maintaining that Ian Stewart was not responsible for her death. They posited that she had been kidnapped by two unknown assailants. The defense emphasized the lack of direct evidence linking Stewart to the crime, arguing that the prosecution's case rested heavily on speculation and circumstantial evidence. Ultimately, on February 22, 2017, the jury reached their verdict, finding Ian Stewart guilty of murder. This decision confirmed the suspicion surrounding his involvement in Helen Bailey's death and validated the prosecution's narrative. The jury's findings underscored the financial motives and premeditated actions that led to the tragic outcome. On February 23, 2017, Ian Stewart faced the sentencing hearing at St. Albans Crown Court following his conviction. The courtroom filled with those affected by the case, all awaiting the judge's decision on the appropriate punishment for Stewart's heinous actions. During the hearing, Judge Andrew Bright delivered a pointed and comprehensive address regarding Stewart's conduct and motivations. He described Ian Stewart as a manipulative individual who had orchestrated Helen's murder with chilling premeditation. The judge emphasized that financial gain was the primary motive behind Stewart's actions, revealing the depths of his deceit. Following Judge Bright's remarks, he announced the sentence for Ian Stewart, life imprisonment with a minimum term set at 34 years. This sentence reflected the grave nature of the crime and the calculated manner in which it was executed. The judge also highlighted the need for public safety, cautioning that Stewart posed a potential danger to women he might form connections with in the future. The courtroom remained silent, absorbing the weight of his words. As the gavel struck, sealing Ian Stewart's fate, the haunting reality of Helen Bailey's tragic end lingered in the air, leaving behind a community forever changed by the darkness that had unfolded. As the trial progressed, it became increasingly clear that financial gain was the driving force behind Ian Stewart's actions. The prosecution highlighted a meticulously orchestrated scheme designed to siphon off Helen Bailey's considerable wealth, painting a picture of greed and betrayal. Following Judge Andrew Bright's remarks, the gravity of the situation culminated in a life-altering announcement. Ian Stewart was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term set at 34 years. This harsh sentence reflected not only the serious nature of the crime, but also the cold, premeditated manner in which it was executed. In his ruling, Judge Bright underscored the importance of public safety, expressing deep concern over Stewart's potential future relationships. He made it clear that Stewart posed a significant danger to any woman who might cross his path. The minimum term established ensured that significant time would pass before any consideration for Ian Stewart's parole could be made. On August 21, 2018, following his contradictory accounts of events leading up to Helen Bailey's disappearance, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Following Ian Stewart's conviction for the murder of Helen Bailey, police initiated a re-examination of the circumstances surrounding the death of his first wife, Diane Stewart, who had tragically passed away in 2010. This renewed investigation was spurred by unsettling concerns raised during the trial regarding the true nature of Diane's death, which had initially been classified as an accident. The circumstances surrounding Diane's passing began to draw intense scrutiny as investigators sought to uncover the hidden truths that may have been overlooked. In light of Ian Stewart's subsequent actions and the disturbing revelations about his character, authorities were compelled to explore any potential connections between Diane's untimely death and Ian's dubious behavior. Particularly given the manipulative tendencies he exhibited in his relationship with Helen, Ian Stewart appeared in St. Albans Crown Court on July 6, 2020, facing charges related to the murder of Diane Stewart. His defense during this trial mirrored the tactics he employed in Helen's case, where he attempted to deflect blame and weave alternative narratives regarding the circumstances of Diane's death. Ultimately, the jury found Ian Stewart guilty of Diane Stewart's murder on February 9, 2022, initially sentencing him to life imprisonment with a whole life order. This ruling would have meant he would serve his sentence without the possibility of parole. However, on July 29, 2022, the Court of Appeal revised this to a minimum of 35 years. The case of Helen Bailey is a harrowing example of betrayal, manipulation, and the tragic consequences of an abusive relationship. Ian Stewart's actions not only extinguished the life of a beloved author, but also revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior that ultimately led to his conviction for 2 murders. The lingering question remains, what could have been done differently to prevent such a tragic outcome? Could earlier intervention have altered the course of events for both Helen and Diane Stewart? Regardless of the circumstances, Ian Stewart was found guilty and justly sentenced for his heinous crimes. He was charged and found guilty of the murder of Helen Bailey on February 22, 2017, receiving a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. Furthermore, he was also convicted of the murder of Diane Stewart on February 9, 2022. Initially sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, his sentence was later reduced to a minimum term of 35 years by the Court of Appeal, marking the end of a dark chapter in the lives of those affected by his actions. Initially handed a whole life order, the severity of Stewart's sentence was later revisited by the Court of Appeal, resulting in a reduction to a minimum term of 35 years.